What's up? I'm back. This segment is kind of like a little commentary on my hip hop videos that I did in Macalesi. The videos, I'm really pleased with the response that I got, and we still have part three to come. But I found it interesting because I had a few people ask me why I didn't rep the underground, and underground is gonna be more of a factor in part three. And while some people ask me why I didn't rep the underground, when I was looking at the response of part two of the hip hop video, where we focus a lot on the international aspect, I noticed that a lot of people didn't really. It was different. It was different. You know, it's it's judging the response, like looking at the response, was interesting in this sense. That's what I would say because you know a lot of people who love hip hop culture don't really realize that hip hop is growing, it's evolving. And from my perspective, if you do not know how to, like, in order to really understand where it's going or its potential, you would basically have to understand the underground. You have to understand its international aspect, and of course, you have to understand its origin. The elements, all that good stuff. I think what happens to most people today is that most people like rap, not hip hop, and they like commercial hip hop, which is cool. For me, I don't get into the commercial underground thing myself per se. I get into what I enjoy, and what I see, you know, is a representation of the art. Unfortunately, the underground is more of a representation of the art of hip hop. You can show someone, you could take the average person, right, who likes mainstream hip hop. Don't even have to say their names, and that's all they know, right? For them, old school like Biggie and Tupac, and then you give them, you kind of take them through the elements, the break, the b-boying, graffiti, the graffiti culture, DJing, right? You take them through the elements, you take them through the history of hip hop, then you take them to hip hop internationally, right? And once you do that, and then you bring it back, and then after that, you hit them with the underground, right? Hit them with hip hop underground culture. After that, if they're sincere, then ask that person when they hear a mainstream hip hop track on, right? If they're feeling it, guarantee 8 out of 10 times they wouldn't. Now you might get some people who wouldn't want to do that because they're not really truly a fan of art, which is cool too. See, I'm not one of these crazy people. It's cool. You drive in your car. You turn the radio stations. You like one or two songs. You like Rick Ross or Drake. That's cool. I don't got no beef for that. But I think what happens is an imbalancement. So it's like when people criticize hip hop, because it's not just, I was looking at the response. It's not just the international this element that really got people. I think in some ways it was even, if you were a hip hop hater, like, think of it, right? You get some of these hip hop haters, right? Some of them could get even racial sometimes, right? They hate it, right? They say so thugs, it's this and that, it promotes drugs, blah blah blah. Then when you look at the video Macalesi and I did, and you look at the fact that, I mean, it's international, it's beautiful. Like, you see the beauty of it. You see it going into different aspects of itself. 4 or 5 elements. It creates subcultures. It goes into other countries and blends with the culture of the country and turns into something new. I mean, that's very hard for other genres to duplicate. And then when you put that back all together, and then you look at it as it had very, could be activist in nature. It was the voice of the underclass or the unrepresented. You put all that together, it's very hard to critique it. It's a culture, so yeah, the culture is going to be. See, the difference of other genres. Other genres are just that, genres. So, you know, you listen to whatever genre it might be. That's it. But hip hop's a culture, so it's gonna be made up of people with different religions. It's gonna be people made up of different what they perceive hip hop to be. Sometimes, like, I know I saw some people arguing about whether hip hop, whether other, well, they didn't say other races. It was something where they said white people are guests in hip hop, and people got mad, and the person who said it, Lord Jamal, was old school, right? And people say, oh, hip hop's changed and stuff like that. Now, when you look at our videos on hip hop, I didn't have enough time to do it, so I actually wanted to do much more, but I was under a time constraint. Funny, because when I hit argument, I said I don't understand what the argument is. It's obviously that it's a black culture, but it was a black culture that embraced other cultures as long as they respected it. So if you proved yourself, you were cool. I don't really see what's the big deal in a sense, but I do admit though, It's dangerous when you have that mentality from one aspect. Hip hop is very interesting in the sense that even in America, you would have people who would argue about East West Coast, down South New York. You would have Trinidad James go to New York and say New York's not running things anymore, and Atlanta's running things now. And I think for even people who make the art, make the music, I think they have to open up their minds a little bit. Because when we're making these assessments, the assessment is made on just your local environment or even your nation. And to me, it's gone global. And the same way how now when you rhyme now, you be in the Bay, you be in the ATL, you be in New York, you be in Chicago. The back of your mind, you think about what people outside your hood is saying. To be honest, you're thinking about what they're gonna say when they hear this stuff, right? Because you're thinking now nationwide. The time's gonna come when now we gotta go global. It's like if you go on Latin music, and whether you talking about, because even if you say, let's say reggaeton, which would be more centered in Puerto Rico, to some extent Panama, but when they tour, they gotta tour Central America, Honduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela, El Salvador, Ecuador, right? So when they thinking about it, they still assess some of the other markets would think about them. So if I make a statement that Atlanta runs hip hop, which it does, the mainstream level, you're only looking at it from the mainstream level, which is cool if your fans do that. See, I don't expect the fans themselves to be international per se. They should know underground, though, to be honest, if they're really fan of hip hop. The international part, I give them a pass. On the underground part, they're supposed to know. But let's say we get past that, right? I don't expect them to know that. But I do expect the rappers themselves to be, because they're touring in other nations now. They're touring other parts of the countries now. So they're just like when they had the East Coast, West Coast beef. You ask anybody from the Bay, they say that's more of a LA versus New York thing. That wasn't East Coast, West Coast. And in fact, that wasn't even East Coast, West Coast really. It was really more West Coast rappers against the East Coast media, which didn't play West Coast stuff. Yeah, of course, Pac and Suge lit the candle to the flame. But if you look at it carefully, it wasn't really East Coast, West Coast. The Bay never had no beef with the East Coast per se. Maybe one or two incidents, but for the most part, it was cool. So then you look at it carefully, then you say these assessments that people are making is coming from limited information. And again, it's okay if the fans do that, but the rappers or the people performing the art are supposed to know better, because the fifth element is knowledge. And I think sometimes knowledge is not cool to people, and because of that, the art suffers. So for me, the underground, the international part of it would have to be added to hip-hop in general. When I say hip-hop, I'm not even talking about rap. I'm talking about the complete 5 elements, the complete culture. You add all three like a trinity, and then you make your assessment on things. Sorry, there's a lot of rappers now in Poland and Czech Republic. There's a lot of rappers of Caucasian descent, even in the underground. Even if you don't say the underground, the fans themselves, even Dead President, what they will tell you, 65% of their fans are white people now when they go to their concerts. So when we're making these assessments, I don't know if we're adding all these factors up. And if we're not adding all these factors up, the assessment is incomplete. So, interesting. Part 3 should come next week. Till next time. Peace.